June 4th, 1942. 10:52 in the morning. On board the Japanese aircraft carrier Hiryu, 150 miles northwest of Midway Atoll, Lieutenant Mio Kobayashi's hand quivered as he meticulously marked positions on his navigation chart. His pencil hovered, uncertain, over coordinates that defied logical explanation. Peering through the ready room's porthole, he observed Admiral Yamaguchi Tamon intently studying reconnaissance photographs, his expression a mask of profound disbelief. This was not anger, nor simple confusion, but the dawning, devastating realization that something fundamentally, catastrophically wrong had occurred. It seemed impossible. They had confirmed her sinking in the Coral Sea. He had personally witnessed her aflame, listing heavily, abandoned. Yet the photograph clearly depicted an American carrier launching aircraft. Its distinctive superstructure was unmistakable, even through the grainy image. 3 carriers. The Americans possessed 3 carriers at Midway, not 2. The mathematical certainty of their impending victory, based on 4 Japanese carriers against 2 American ones, had just evaporated. 27 days prior, in the Coral Sea, Japanese pilots had left this very same carrier, mortally wounded, trailing oil, dead in the water. Admiral Takagi had reported her elimination to Tokyo. The Yorktown-class carrier was deemed out of the fight. The Naval General Staff had consequently removed her from their strategic calculations. Nevertheless, here she was, the USS Yorktown, very much operational, her aircraft already descending upon the Japanese fleet. Through the ship's intercom, Kobayashi could discern the growing bewilderment spreading across Hiryu like wildfire. 3 carriers meant 230 American aircraft, not the anticipated 150. 3 carriers meant the carefully planned ambush had been irrevocably reversed. 3 carriers meant everything. Imperial Navy intelligence regarding American repair capabilities had been catastrophically misinformed. The stark paradox, the impossible sight of the Yorktown at Midway, shattered the core Japanese assumption about industrial realities. In the Imperial Navy's meticulous calculations, proper repair of battle damage necessitated painstaking attention, months of dedicated work, and the pride of honorable craftsmanship. A carrier sustaining a 551-pound bomb penetration through 5 decks, with ruptured fuel tanks and destroyed internal compartments, would require a minimum of 90 days in the finest naval shipyard. The mathematics had been irrefutable. The Enterprise and Hornet were presumed to be the only operational American carriers in the Pacific. The Lexington lay at the bottom of the Coral Sea. The Saratoga was still undergoing repairs from torpedo damage. The new Essex-class carriers would not be ready until 1943. Japanese intelligence had repeatedly confirmed these facts. Yet mathematics seemed to hold no sway over the SBD Dauntless dive bombers now plummeting towards the Japanese flight decks. As Admiral Nagumo's staff officers frantically recalculated their position, one grim truth emerged. They had based Operation MI entirely on the assumption that the Americans were incapable of achieving what they had so demonstrably accomplished. The deception before the Coral Sea engagement. May 8, 1942. Coral Sea, 500 miles northeast of Australia. The attack had been executed with textbook perfection. 18 Type 99 dive bombers from the carriers Shokaku and Zuikaku located the USS Yorktown emerging from a rain squall. Lieutenant Commander Kakuichi Takahashi, leading the strike force, watched his pilots deliver a direct hit near the ship's island structure. The 250-kilogram bomb penetrated the flight deck and detonated 5 decks below, the blast clearly visible from 10,000 feet. The Yorktown emerged, trailing a 10-meter oil slick, listing heavily by the bow, with visible fires burning through breaches in her hull. Her speed was reduced to what Japanese observers estimated at a mere 6 knots. Aircraft returning to the Japanese carriers reported her finished, listing so severely that recovery operations were deemed impossible. Photographs revealed destroyers moving in to offer rescue assistance. Admiral Takagi Tei radioed combined fleet headquarters. 2 American carriers confirmed destroyed. Yorktown and Lexington eliminated. The Emperor was duly informed. Naval planners at Kure removed the Yorktown from their order of battle. In their strategic calculations for the upcoming Midway operation, she simply ceased to exist. Captain Elliot Buckmaster, the Yorktown's commanding officer, however, harbored entirely different intentions. As his damaged vessel limped away at 20 knots, a far cry from the 6 knots reported by Japanese observers, his damage control teams commenced their initial miraculous effort. The bomb had instantly claimed 66 lives, destroyed 6 compartments, rendered elevator machinery inoperable, and ruptured fuel tanks along 30 frames. By every established standard of naval engineering, the Yorktown was in need of months of dry dock refurbishment. The journey home, the first of her impossible tasks, commenced on May 8th and concluded on May 27th, 1942. From the Coral Sea to Pearl Harbor, the 3,300-mile voyage offered the initial glimpse into the distinct American industrial philosophy. While the Yorktown's damage was grievous, her crew approached the repairs with a mindset utterly foreign to Japanese thinking. The imperative was simple: make it functional, make it swift, make it fight. Chief Carpenter Boyd Mackenzie disregarded conventional damage control manuals. Instead of adhering to the lengthy process of properly replacing damaged structural beams, a procedure requiring dry dock facilities, he simply welded steel plates over them, creating crude but effective patches. The machinery spaces told their own compelling story. The bomb had obliterated the No. 2 elevator machinery and severely damaged 3 boiler rooms. Engineers ingeniously rebuilt critical systems by cannibalizing parts from the ship's machine shop, fabricating new components from sheet metal and jury-rigging equipment intended for other purposes. As the Yorktown maintained a speed of 20 knots despite damage that should have realistically limited her to 12, American submarines diligently reported her position to Pearl Harbor. Japanese intelligence intercepted these coded dispatches, but interpreted them through their own prejudiced lens, assuming a damaged vessel proceeding at speed meant only 5 to 8 knots. They calculated that she would not reach Pearl Harbor until mid-June, far too late for any meaningful repairs before the Midway operation, which was scheduled for June 4th. Pearl Harbor, where the impossible began to materialize. May 27th, 1942. 100 hours, Pearl Harbor Naval Base. The Yorktown's arrival presented a stark and sobering spectacle. The 10-mile oil slick was visible even from Diamond Head. She listed to port, smoke wisped from temporary patches on her hull. Rear Admiral Aubrey Fitch, who had personally witnessed the extent of the damage, had cabled his assessment: 90 days minimum required for battle readiness. However, Pearl Harbor in May of 1942 had been transformed from a peacetime naval station into something unprecedented. It was now a forward operating repair base functioning at the very edge of what was considered possible. The monumental salvage operation of the battleships from December 7th had forged a workforce that thought in terms of hours, not months. Admiral Chester Nimitz met the Yorktown at the dock. Unlike Japanese admirals who commanded from battleships situated hundreds of miles behind the front lines, Nimitz waded through oily water in dry dock No. 1, personally inspecting the damage while the dock was still partially filled with water. His trousers soaked, his hands blackened with oil, he turned to Captain Claude Gillette, the yard superintendent, and Lieutenant Commander H.J. Fingstag, the hull repair expert. "We must have this ship back in 3 days," he declared. The ensuing silence felt agonizingly prolonged. Fingstag finally swallowed hard and replied, "Yes, sir." Station Hypo, the intelligence imperative. The 3-day deadline was not arbitrary. In the basement of Building 1, a mere 400 yards from the dry dock, Commander Joseph Rochefort's Station Hypo had successfully broken JN-25, the Japanese Naval Operations Code. They knew AF referred to Midway. They knew the attack date, June 4th. They knew the Japanese order of battle: 4 carriers of the 1st Air Fleet. More crucially, they knew the Japanese anticipated facing only the Enterprise and Hornet. The Japanese firmly believed the Yorktown had been neutralized. This critical intelligence transformed the Yorktown's repair from a matter of urgency to one of existential importance. Without her, the Americans would face a 4-2 disadvantage. With her, the odds would be 3-4, still unfavorable but potentially surmountable. The 72-hour marathon commenced on May 28th at 5:30 a.m. in Dry Dock Number 1. Before the dock had fully drained, while water still swirled ankle-deep, 1,400 workers swarmed aboard the Yorktown. They arrived from every workshop on the base: welders, electricians, ship fitters, machinists, pipe fitters, sheet metal workers. Many had worked through the night on other vessels. They were prepared to work for 72 consecutive hours. This unprecedented repair effort defied conventional Japanese industrial philosophy. Instead of meticulous planning and hierarchical approvals, the work proceeded as a form of controlled chaos. Supervisors made instant decisions. Workers readily crossed traditional trade boundaries. The sole governing principle was to make her fight. The specific techniques employed would have sent Japanese naval architects into a state of horror. The bomb damage. The 551-pound bomb had wrought destruction from the flight deck down through 5 decks. Japanese doctrine would have dictated cutting away all damaged steel, fabricating replacement sections, and meticulously rebuilding each deck. The estimated time required: 30 days. Pearl Harbor's solution: leave the damaged structure in place. Weld massive steel plates over everything. Shore up weakened areas with wooden beams sourced from construction sites. Time elapsed: 18 hours. The fuel tanks. Near misses had ruptured tanks along 30 frames, severely contaminating the fuel supplies. Japanese protocol mandated draining, cleaning, meticulous inspection, and individual repair of each compromised tank. Time required: 2 weeks. The American solution: pump out the contaminated fuel. Seal ruptures with quick hardening cement intended for runway repair. Weld plates over everything. Ignore tanks too severely damaged for rapid repair, sealing them completely. Time elapsed: 11 hours. The machinery: 3 boiler rooms sustained damage, reducing superheat capacity by 70% and limiting maximum speed to 27 knots instead of 32.5. Japanese standards would have necessitated complete replacement. Pearl Harbor's approach: ignore the superheaters entirely. Accept the speed reduction. Focus solely on basic functionality. Time elapsed: 14 hours. The worker's reality. Electrician Lewis Walters, 21 years old, would later recall, "We didn't have time for proper repairs. We ran cables over decks instead of through conduits. We welded plates over holes instead of replacing damaged sections. Everything was temporary, ugly but functional." The arithmetic of the repair effort: 20 tons of steel plate welded, 35 miles of electrical cable strung, 400 tons of contaminated fuel pumped out, 3 demolished compartments sealed off. Continuous arc welding consumed so much power it triggered rolling blackouts across the island of Oahu. Workers ate while welding and slept in 15-minute shifts leaning against bulkheads. When the welding drew so much electricity that hospitals lost power, Oahu's civilians accepted the rolling blackouts without complaint. When the shipyard required lumber, construction companies delivered it without any paperwork. The hull repairs defied all established naval architecture principles. Ruptured seams were wedged with wood, covered with steel plates, and welded solid, creating what one engineer described as a metal scab. Electrical repairs abandoned all pretense of proper procedure. Cables were strung along decks, through hatches, and across ceilings. The departure was scheduled for May 30th, 1942, 9 o'clock in the morning. The Yorktown departed Pearl Harbor with shipyard workers still aboard, continuing their repairs as the vessel gathered speed. These workers would disembark as the ship cleared the harbor entrance. The air group assembled on her flight deck was itself a testament to American adaptability. Bombing Squadron 3 was drawn from the USS Saratoga. Torpedo Squadron 3 was a cobbled-together unit from survivors. Fighting Squadron 3. combined pilots from 3 different squadrons who had never operated together before. As the Yorktown cleared Pearl Harbor, the workers who had performed the impossible lined the docks. Chief Hull Technician Fingstag would later remark, "We sent her out looking like a fighter who'd been patched up between rounds. She wasn't pretty, but she could still throw punches." Point Luck Rendezvous, June 2nd, 1942. 325 miles northeast of Midway. The Yorktown joined the Enterprise and Hornet at Point Luck. The crews of the other carriers were visibly stunned. Commander W.D.E. McCluskey, the Enterprise's air group commander, later wrote, "We knew Yorktown had been damaged at Coral Sea. We expected maybe she'd limp in as reserve. Instead, she was launching aircraft, running flight operations, looking ready for battle." Admiral Frank Jack Fletcher, commanding from the Yorktown, understood something crucial. The Yorktown's presence was not merely about adding aircraft to the count, it was about shattering Japanese assumptions. In his final briefing, Fletcher told his staff, "The Japanese have planned this operation for months, every detail calculated for facing 2 carriers. When our aircraft appear over their fleet, that certainty dies." Japanese confidence. Aboard the flagship Akagi, Admiral Nagumo Chuichi conducted final preparations with absolute confidence. 4 carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, Hiryu, with 248 aircraft against 2 American carriers with 150 aircraft. Veterans of Pearl Harbor facing Americans who had yet to secure a decisive carrier victory. Captain Minoru Genda, Nagumo's air operations officer, had war-gamed every conceivable scenario. Even if the Americans achieved surprise, the Japanese pilot superiority and numerical advantage would undoubtedly prevail. The only variable that could truly alter the equation would be a 3rd American carrier, and intelligence had unequivocally confirmed that was an impossibility. The Yorktown was considered defunct. Commander Mitsuo Fuchida, who had led the attack on Pearl Harbor, was suffering from appendicitis but remained aboard as an observer. Years later, he would write, "Our entire plan rested on intelligence that the Americans had 2 carriers, not approximately 2, not possibly 3, but exactly 2. If that information was wrong, then everything was wrong." June 4th, the shattering. 4:30 a.m. The Japanese carriers launched 108 aircraft against Midway Atoll. The morning began precisely according to plan. Nagumo held 108 aircraft in reserve, designated for the American fleet, confident in his meticulously laid trap. 7:10 a.m. Japanese scout planes began reporting. An American carrier had been sighted. 1 carrier was expected. Nagumo ordered his reserve aircraft rearmed with torpedoes for ship attack. Then, confusion descended. Scout reports indicated the apparent presence of 2 carriers, still within their calculated parameters. 8:20 a.m. Torpedo Squadron. 8 from the Hornet attacked. Lieutenant Commander John Waldron led 15 TBD Devastators against the Japanese fleet without fighter escort. All 15 were shot down. Only Ensign George Gay survived. However, Waldron's sacrifice successfully drew the Japanese Combat Air Patrol down to sea level. 8:40 a.m., Torpedo Squadron 6 from the Enterprise attacked. 10 of their 14 Devastators were shot down. No hits were scored, but once again, the defending Zeros were drawn low. 9:15 a.m., Torpedo Squadron 3 from the Yorktown launched its attack. This was the moment of revelation. As 12 more Devastators began their runs, Japanese lookouts meticulously counted the attacking aircraft. Too many. The mathematics were fundamentally wrong. There were 3 American carriers, not 2. On the Hiryu's bridge, Admiral Yamaguchi rapidly calculated the grim implications. 3 carriers changed everything, but before new orders could be issued, before the Japanese could even begin to adjust their strategy, the dive bombers arrived. 10:22 a.m., the decisive moment. Lieutenant Commander Maxwell Leslie, leading the Yorktown's Bombing Squadron 3, had initially become lost but subsequently located the Japanese fleet by following a destroyer's wake. His 17 SBD Dauntless dive bombers arrived over the Japanese fleet at the exact same moment as the Enterprise's bombers, not through pre-arranged plan, but by the accidental consequence of the Yorktown's delayed launch due to her damaged boilers. From an altitude of 14,000 feet, Leslie surveyed the scene below. 4 Japanese carriers with flight decks crammed with armed and fueled aircraft. Their combat air patrol was occupied at sea level. Within 6 minutes, 3 Japanese carriers were engulfed in flames. The Soryu, struck by 3 bombs from Leslie's squadron, exploded in a catastrophic inferno, its flames visible for 50 miles. Japanese response: attacking the Ghost. Admiral Yamaguchi aboard the Hiryu faced seemingly impossible odds. 3 American carriers against his sole surviving vessel. Nevertheless, he launched 18 dive bombers and 6 fighters against the nearest American carrier, the Yorktown. As the strike force approached, flight leader Lieutenant Mo Kobayashi studied the carrier through his binoculars and felt his world inexplicably tilt. The island structure, the flight deck configuration. This was the Yorktown, the very ship they believed they had annihilated in the Coral Sea. 12:05 p.m. 3 bombs struck the Yorktown, igniting fires and rupturing steam lines. The ship went dead in the water. For the second time in 27 days, Japanese pilots left the Yorktown burning and seemingly finished. Yet, even as she blazed, the Yorktown had already irrevocably altered the course of events. Her morning strike had sunk the Soryu. By absorbing the Hiryu's attack, she had shielded the Enterprise and Hornet, allowing them to prepare for the counter-strike that would doom the Hiryu 4 hours later. Damage control excellence. Captain Buckmaster ordered an immediate damage assessment. The hastily executed Pearl Harbor repairs, though crude and improvised, were holding firm. The welded plates had not fractured. Chief Engineer John F. Delaney reported, "The Japanese bombs hurt us, but the Pearl Harbor repairs are solid. Give me 2 hours." Within 1 hour, 3 boilers were relit, fires were contained, and counter-flooding efforts reduced the ship's list. By 1:40 p.m., the Yorktown was making 19 knots and refueling fighters, appearing so recovered that when the Hiryu's second strike arrived at 2:30 p.m., the pilots genuinely believed they were engaging a different, undamaged carrier. The second strike confusion. 2:30 p.m., Lieutenant Tominaga Joy, leading 5 torpedo bombers from the Hiryu, expected to find a burning Yorktown. Instead, he encountered a carrier underway, actively launching fighters. His confused report to the Hiryu suggested they might be engaging a second carrier, leading the Japanese staff to suspect the presence of as many as 4 American carriers. While Tominaga's torpedoes would ultimately seal the Yorktown's fate, the resulting confusion prevented a coordinated response before the Enterprise's dive bombers located and sank the Hiryu at 5 p.m. The final act. June 6th, 1:31 p.m., the Japanese submarine I-168, commanded by Lieutenant Commander Yahachi Tanaba, discovered the Yorktown under tow. Tanaba fired 4 torpedoes. 2 found their mark on the Yorktown, while 1 struck the destroyer USS Hammond, which was alongside. As the Yorktown rolled over and sank on June 7th, Tanaba logged, "Sank American carrier, probably Saratoga." Even in her demise, the Yorktown sowed confusion. The Japanese never fully comprehended that the carrier they encountered at Midway was the same vessel they believed they had sunk in the Coral Sea. The mathematical reality, the numbers themselves, tell the story. Yorktown's repair. Japanese estimate for similar damage, 90 to 120 days. American peacetime standard, 30 to 45 days. Actual time taken, 72 hours. Workers involved, 1,400 continuously. Combat effectiveness achieved, 85%. Battle impact. Japanese assumption of 4 carriers versus 2 equaling certain victory. Actual situation. 4 carriers versus 3 equaling a rough parity. Result: 4 Japanese carriers sunk, 1 American carrier sunk. Strategic multiplication. The Soryu was definitively sunk by the Yorktown's aircraft. 2 Japanese strikes were absorbed that would have otherwise hit the Enterprise or Hornet. 75 Japanese aircraft were destroyed attacking the Yorktown. The Japanese offensive capability was permanently crippled. The witnesses speak. Years later, the participants would reflect on the profound significance of the Yorktown's presence. Commander Mitsuo Fuchida, Japanese. The appearance of a third carrier shattered our planning. Every calculation, every scenario assumed 2 carriers. When lookouts reported more torpedo planes than 2 carriers could launch, we knew something was terribly wrong. By the time we understood, 3 carriers were burning. Aviation machinist Tom Cheek, USS Enterprise. When we saw Yorktown at Point Luck, grown men actually cheered. We knew she'd been hurt bad at Coral Sea, but there she was, patched like a prize fighter, ready for another round. Electrician Wayne Morrison, Pearl Harbor. When we heard she'd helped sink 3 Japanese carriers before taking hits, the whole yard went quiet. Then someone started clapping. Soon 10,000 workers were applauding. Those 3 days meant something. Japanese comprehension. The Japanese gradually came to understand what had transpired, but full comprehension eluded them for years. Admiral Matome Ugaki, Yamamoto's chief of staff, wrote in his diary, "The appearance of Yorktown at Midway was not luck. It was preparation. Somehow the Americans knew our plans. The 3-day repair was not a miracle. It was a response to intelligence." In 1962, Lieutenant Commander Tanner Bay visited Pearl Harbor. Shown Dry Dock Number 1, where the Yorktown had been repaired, he stood in silent contemplation for long minutes, then said, "Now I understand. We were not fighting a nation. We were fighting an idea that anything is possible if you work hard enough. We believed in spirit over matter. Americans believed in matter properly applied." Admiral Shigeru Fukui, in his memoirs, wrote, "Yorktown taught us the war was lost before it began. Any nation that could repair such damage in 3 days could not be defeated by any nation that required 3 months." It was about a clash of philosophies. The approach to repairing the Yorktown revealed profound differences between American and Japanese wartime thinking. For the Japanese, it was about achieving absolute perfection, a testament to their craftsmanship and pride in every detail. Damaged vessels absolutely had to be returned to their pristine, original state, with time being a secondary concern to quality. In stark contrast, the American philosophy prioritized functionality, speed, and adaptability. Damaged ships weren't meant to be showpieces. They needed to be battle-ready. Time was of the essence. This disparity extended beyond naval repairs. Japan meticulously engineered and handcrafted exquisite aircraft, while America focused on producing vast numbers of perfectly adequate, interchangeable planes, repairable with whatever materials were at hand. The crucial advantage came from an intelligence coup. Station Hypo's code-breaking efforts rendered the Yorktown's swift repair not just urgent but actionable. Without the Yorktown, Admirals Nimitz and Fletcher might not have gambled on a decisive engagement. With her presence, however, the odds became considerably more favorable. As Commander Rochefort later articulated, "We could read their mail, but reading meant nothing if we couldn't act." The Yorktown provided the imperative strength to act. Those shipyard workers were just as vital as any cryptanalyst. The long-term ramifications were significant. The Yorktown's repair fundamentally reshaped naval damage control doctrine. Speed took precedence over perfection, becoming the new standard. Functionality superseded aesthetics in operational strategy. Innovation trumped adherence to rigid procedures in practical application. The Yorktown standard emerged. Any vessel capable of floating could be salvaged and returned to service. This remarkable feat also showcased American industrial resilience to the global stage. The very workers who restored the Yorktown in just 72 hours were emblematic of the workforce that would later construct Liberty ships in 4 days, B-24 bombers in 63 minutes, and ultimately the atomic bomb within 3 years. In 1985, surviving Pearl Harbor shipyard personnel convened with Yorktown veterans in Hawaii for a commemoration of the battle. Lewis Walters, the electrician who had tirelessly strung cables for 72 hours straight, encountered Tom Lee, a gunner whose vital battle station relied on those very cables. "Your wiring saved my life," Lee stated. "When we took the initial bomb hit, primary power failed, but your backup cables kept my guns operational." Walters responded, "We understood that young men would depend on our efforts. Every weld, every wire, every patch. We envisioned someone's son needing it to function flawlessly." Following the war, Admiral Nimitz offered a definitive assessment. He posited that the 3 days the Yorktown spent undergoing repairs in dry dock might have been the most pivotal 3 days of the entire Pacific War. This significance wasn't solely due to the repair itself, astonishing as it was, but rather what it symbolized. American democracy in motion, American workers committed, and American industry unleashed. The Japanese arrived at Midway anticipating a confrontation with the America they envisioned, sluggish, complacent, and fractured. Instead, they encountered the actual America, rapid, resilient, and unified. The Yorktown was irrefutable proof. A vessel they believed they had decisively crippled reappeared, fully operational. When Japanese aviators spotted Yorktown's aircraft overhead their carriers, they saw more than just planes. They perceived American resolve personified. They glimpsed a future where industrial prowess and unwavering human determination could surmount any obstacle. The laborers who resurrected the Yorktown did more than mend a ship. They demonstrated a national characteristic destined to secure victory. During those 3 days, the workers at Pearl Harbor proved that in America, impossible was merely a temporary state, awaiting resolution. The numbers that underscore the triumph reveal a clear mathematical truth. Investment: 72 hours of dedicated labor, 1,400 workers, $2.2 million in materials, and 3 days diverted from other critical projects. Return: 1. Japanese carrier decisively sunk by Yorktown's aircraft. 2 significant Japanese assaults absorbed. 3,220 Japanese aircraft destroyed in combat, and 3,570 Japanese personnel lost. The offensive capacity of Japan was permanently crippled. Demonstration: American repair capabilities vastly exceeded Japanese projections by 3,000%, validating the philosophy of rapid restoration. New damage control standards were established, and inspiration for accelerated production permeated the entirety of American industry. The lingering enigma for the Japanese was profound. One question persisted: how did the Americans possess the foresight to repair the Yorktown with such alacrity? How did they anticipate the Battle of Midway occurring on June 4th? The answer: that American codebreakers were intercepting Japanese communications in real time, would remain undisclosed for decades. Yet, even without knowledge of the cryptanalysis, the Yorktown's presence at that precise moment should have conveyed everything. The Americans had comprehensive intelligence regarding their adversaries' plans. Contemporary naval doctrine still imparts the crucial lesson of the Yorktown. Speed is paramount, surpassing the pursuit of perfection. Adaptability triumphs over meticulous planning. The adversary will not pause for flawless repairs. Modern damage control protocols, emphasizing swift restoration over absolute perfection, trace their lineage directly to the Yorktown's 72 hours in dry dock. Every sailor is educated on this narrative, and every damage control specialist understands the established standard. Captain Buckmaster, the Yorktown's commanding officer, offered perhaps the most insightful summary. The Japanese expected us to follow conventions. Their rules dictated how long repairs should take, but we're Americans. We don't adhere to existing rules. We invent them as we proceed. Our mandate was straightforward: the Yorktown fights at Midway. Those workers at Pearl Harbor didn't perform a miracle. They embodied American industrial democracy, messy, improvised, imperfect, yet utterly indomitable. They fixed my ship by any means necessary. It wasn't aesthetically pleasing, nor was it conventional, but it was ready. When they set sail on May 30th, the Yorktown was not the same vessel she had been prior to the Battle of the Coral Sea. She had become something novel, a synthesis of her original form, improvisation, and sheer determination. She was, in essence, America itself, damaged but unyielding, patched but unbroken, and poised for combat. The Japanese forces at Midway encountered more than just 3 aircraft carriers. They faced American resolve forged into steel, a transformation that began with 72 hours in a dry dock where the impossible became inevitable. The enduring lesson of those 3 days. The USS Yorktown now rests 16,650 feet beneath the Pacific's surface, located by Robert Ballard in 1998. She lies upright, her battle scars still evident. The repairs undertaken at Pearl Harbor remain visible. Welded plates, crudely patched breaches, functional yet unlovely fixes that enabled her participation in the Battle of Midway. At Pearl Harbor, a plaque at Dry Dock No. 1 commemorates, "Here, in 72 hours, American workers accomplished the impossible, restoring the USS Yorktown for the Battle of Midway. Their labor altered the course of history." The Japanese had indeed awakened a slumbering titan at Pearl Harbor. At Midway, they discovered its formidable capabilities when fully roused, the power to repair the unattainable, achieve the inconceivable, and appear where least expected. Lieutenant Commander Tanabe, credited with delivering the Yorktown's fatal blow, belatedly grasped the magnitude of what he confronted. "We believed we were engaging ships and aircraft. In reality, we were battling an ideology, the conviction that nothing is beyond reach for those who refuse to accept limitations." The workers who executed that impossible repair largely remained unsung heroes. No medals were awarded for their welding, no accolades for running cables, no glory for patching steel. They simply returned to their duties, mending other vessels, contributing to the war effort one repair at a time. However, their 72 hours irrevocably altered history. By proving the Yorktown could be repaired in 3 days, they demonstrated America's boundless potential. By dispatching a patched-up carrier to Midway, they conveyed a potent message to the world. American industrial might was not merely about manufacturing capacity, but about unwavering will, relentless innovation, and an absolute refusal to concede defeat. The Yorktown's appearance at Midway represented more than a tactical surprise. It was irrefutable evidence that within the arsenal of democracy, the most potent weapon was neither the bomb nor the bullet, but the American worker armed with a welding torch and 3 days to accomplish the extraordinary. And they did it. The saga of the USS Yorktown's resurrection stands as an eternal testament to the achievements of free people united by a common purpose. In a mere 72 hours, American workers did not simply repair a vessel, they exemplified that determination and ingenuity could conquer any adversity. That functionality held greater importance than superficial appearance, and that the challenges of tomorrow superseded the procedures of yesterday. The Japanese commanders, expressing astonishment at the Yorktown's presence at Midway, witnessed more than a repaired warship. They observed the future. A world where industrial democracy would prevail over military autocracy, where innovative problem-solving would triumph over rigid adherence to protocol, and where laborers, who freely chose to give their utmost, would overcome those compelled by obedience. The Yorktown met her demise on June 7, 1942, sinking to the ocean floor. Yet, what she symbolized rose from those waters, profoundly shaping the remainder of the conflict. Every expedited repair, every seemingly insurmountable deadline met, every challenge resolved through ingenuity rather than prescribed procedure, all could be traced back to those 3 pivotal days in May when 1,400 American workers proved that impossible was merely the initial stage of what could be accomplished. The phantom vessel that haunted the Japanese pilots at Midway was not supernatural. It was something far more formidable. Proof that American democracy, fully mobilized, could achieve anything. The workers were unaware they were forging history. They were simply focused on their task and the tight deadline. During those 3 days, they accomplished more than just repairing a carrier. They vindicated a principle that would propel America through the war and beyond. That free individuals, working collaboratively with shared objectives, could achieve the impossible. That principle, forged into the very steel of the ship and sent to sea, was instrumental in turning the tide of history at Midway. It remains America's enduring, clandestine advantage, not derived from advanced technology or vast resources, but from the fundamental conviction that any problem can be overcome through sufficient effort, intelligence, and speed. The Japanese failed to comprehend this until it was too late. Their measure of time was in months. The Americans was in hours. They pursued flawless execution while the Americans aimed for victory. They adhered to established procedures while the Americans responded to urgent necessity. Ultimately, 3 days in a dry dock determined the fate of the Pacific. 3 days that demonstrated the arsenal of democracy's greatest asset was not merely its armaments or its system of governance, but the potent synergy of both. Free individuals choosing to confront the impossible and then succeeding.